Welcome to the Sleeping Archive, where history comes alive through the voices of those who lived it.
The bell of Westminster Abbey calls me to Lord's, as it has for 37 years, its bronze voice echoing across the stone corridors like the breath of God himself. I am Brother Oswin, keeper of the scriptorium, guardian of parchment and ink, and today, though I do not yet know it, I begin to chronicle the end of everything I have ever known. The year is 1534, and King Henry has declared himself supreme head of the Church of England. The words taste like ash in my mouth even now as I dip my quill into the horn of oak gall ink, the same recipe my predecessor, Brother Aldrich, taught me when I was but 17, and my hands shook with the sacred duty of copying God's word. I rise before dawn, as is my custom, my knees creaking like old parchment as I kneel beside my narrow cot. The stone floor is cold beneath my bare feet, and I welcome the discomfort. It keeps me present in this moment, in this prayer, in this life that grows more uncertain with each passing day. Through the small window of my cell, I can see the Thames flowing dark and silent, carrying the secrets of London toward the sea. Brother Benedict, who sleeps in the cell beside mine, coughs again, a wet, rattling sound that has grown worse these past weeks. He is younger than I by 15 years, but the worry has aged him. We all carry it now, this weight that sits upon our shoulders like a lead cope. The other brothers speak in whispers when they think I cannot hear, their voices carrying fragments of fear. Dissolution, commissioners, visitation. As I don my habit, the rough wool familiar against my skin, I remember the words of Abbot Islip when I first came to Westminster as a boy. The work of God continues, he said, his weathered hands folding over mine as he showed me how to prepare the vellum, how to rule the lines straight and true. Kingdoms rise and fall, but the word endures. I believed him then. I choose to believe him still. The corridor outside my cell stretches long and shadowed, lit only by the oil lamps that burn perpetually before the icons of the saints. St. Benedict watches me pass, his painted eyes following my progress as they have for decades. I nod to him as I do each morning and whisper a prayer for strength. Today I will need it more than most. In the scriptorium, my table waits as it always has, positioned beneath the great window that faces east toward the rising sun. The light here is perfect for the work, clear and steady, neither too harsh nor too dim. My tools are arranged exactly as they were when I left them the evening before. The quills cut to precise angles, the ink mixed to the proper consistency, the ruler straight and true. Order in all things, Brother Aldrich taught me. Order reflects the mind of God. I have been copying the Psalms for the past 3 months, working my way through the songs of David with the methodical patience that is both my gift and my calling. Each letter is formed with deliberate care, each word weighed and considered. The illuminated capitals bloom from the page like flowers in an eternal spring, their colours drawn from lapis lazuli and gold leaf, from crushed berries and ground minerals that transform the written word into something that touches the divine. As I work, I hear the other brothers beginning their day, the shuffle of sandaled feet on stone, the quiet murmur of morning prayers, the distant sound of Brother Thomas stoking the fires in the kitchen. These sounds have formed the rhythm of my life for so long that I barely notice them, yet today they seem precious, each one a note in a symphony that may soon fall silent. Brother Benedict appears at my elbow, his face pale in the morning light. "Brother Oswin," he says, his voice barely above a whisper, "the abbot wishes to see you." I set down my quill carefully, wiping the nib clean before placing it in its holder. "When?" "Now," he says, and I hear the tremor in his voice that he tries to hide. "There are visitors." I follow him through the corridors of the abbey, past the carved stone faces of angels and saints, past the tombs of kings and queens who once ruled this realm with certainty. Our footsteps echo in the silence, a rhythm that speaks of centuries of prayer and devotion, of lives lived in service to something greater than ourselves. The abbot's chamber smells of beeswax and old parchment, of the herbs Brother Francis grows in the physic garden. Abbot Cranmer sits behind his great oak desk, his hands folded before him, his face grave. Beside him stand two men I do not recognize, one tall and thin with the calculating eyes of a lawyer, the other shorter and broader with the soft hands of a clerk. They wear the fine wool and silk of the king's service, their clothing a stark contrast to our rough habits. "Brother Oswin," the abbot says, his voice carefully controlled, "these gentlemen are commissioners of His Majesty King Henry. They have come to conduct a visitation of our house." The tall man steps forward, his smile sharp as a blade. "Master Cromwell has sent us to ensure that Westminster Abbey is in full compliance with the Act of Supremacy," he says, his voice carrying the authority of the Crown. "We understand you are the keeper of the scriptorium." I nod, not trusting my voice to remain steady. Debate the value of centuries of devotion. Brother Francis joins me at the window, his gardener's hands still dirty from tending the herbs that will soon be torn up to make way for whatever use the Crown has planned for our lands. "They counted the silver chalices 3 times, he says quietly, his voice heavy with a weariness that goes deeper than physical exhaustion, as if they might multiply in the counting. I nod, understanding his meaning. These men see only what can be weighed and measured, sold and distributed. They cannot see the weight of prayers said over those chalices, the countless times they have held the blood of Christ, the devotion of generations of craftsmen who shaped them not for profit, but for glory. Brother Oswin," he continues, "there are rumours from the other houses. Fountains Abbey, Rievaulx. They say the commissioners there left nothing behind but empty shells." The words strike me like a physical blow. Fountains Abbey, where Brother William taught me the proper mixing of inks, where the library held manuscripts dating back to the time of the Venerable Bede. Rievaulx, where the chroniclers kept records of our kingdom's history stretching back 3 centuries. If these great houses have fallen, what hope does Westminster have? Yet I continue my work, my quill moving steadily across the parchment. The psalm I am copying speaks of endurance, of the righteous flourishing like a palm tree, growing like a cedar in Lebanon. Perhaps this is my answer to Brother Francis's despair, not words of false comfort, but the simple act of continuing, of maintaining faith in the face of uncertainty. A young clerk, one of several who accompany the commissioners, approaches my table with obvious nervousness. He cannot be much older than Brother Peter, his face soft with youth and inexperience. Unlike his masters, he handles the manuscripts with something approaching reverence, his fingers gentle on the ancient vellum. "Forgive me, brother," he says, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I must ask, this book you are copying, is it your own work?" I glance up at him, noting the genuine curiosity in his eyes. I am copying the Psalms, I reply. The words are King David's, given to us by God. The hand that writes them is mine, but the glory belongs to the Lord. He nods, then hesitates before speaking again. My father was a scribe before he took service with Master Cromwell. He taught me to read and write, showed me how to cut a quill properly. He said there was no work more noble than preserving knowledge. Your father was a wise man, I tell him, and I see something in his eyes shift, a recognition perhaps of what is being lost in this great dissolution. What became of him? He died 3 years past, the young man replies. A fever took him. But before he died, he made me promise to respect books, to understand that they are more than mere objects. He said each one contains a piece of someone's soul. I set down my quill and really look at this young clerk, seeing past his fine clothes and official bearing to the son of a scribe who learned to love books at his father's knee. What is your name, son? Thomas, he says. Thomas Hartwell. Thomas, I repeat, tasting the name. The doubting apostle who needed to touch the wounds of Christ before he could believe. Yet when he did believe, his faith was stronger than all the others. The young man's eyes widen slightly, and I see that he understands the parallel I am drawing. Around us, the work of dissolution continues, the measuring and counting, the cataloguing of what will be sold and what will be destroyed. But here, in this moment, there is a different kind of transaction taking place, a passing of understanding from one generation to the next. Would you like to know how the ink is made? I ask him, and he nods eagerly. I show him the oak galls, small round growths that form on oak trees where wasps have laid their eggs. These are gathered in autumn, when they are rich with tannin, I explain, crushing one between my fingers to show him the dark powder within. We mix this with iron sulfate and gum arabic, adding just enough water to create the proper consistency. The Romans used a similar recipe, and the Greeks before them. It is a knowledge that passes from hand to hand, master to student, across the centuries. Thomas listens with rapt attention, his official duties forgotten for the moment. And the colours? He asks, gesturing to the illuminated capitals that adorn the page before us. Lapis lazuli from the mountains of Afghanistan, ground to powder finer than flour. Gold leaf hammered so thin it seems to float on air. Vermilion made from ground cinnabar, blue from woad and indigo. I touch one of the illuminated letters, its surface smooth as glass. Each colour has its own story, its own journey across the world to reach this page. It must take years to learn all of this, Thomas says, and I hear the longing in his voice. A lifetime, I agree. And still, each day brings new discoveries, new challenges. The vellum that accepts ink beautifully one day may resist it the next. The quill that writes smoothly in dry weather may stutter in dampness. It is a craft that demands not just skill, but patience, humility, and above all, love. One of the senior commissioners calls for Thomas then, his voice sharp with authority. The young man straightens, his face resuming its official composure, but he lingers for a moment longer. Thank you, brother, he says quietly. I will not forget. As he walks away, I return to my copying, but my mind remains on our conversation. In the midst of dissolution, a seed of understanding has been planted. Perhaps this is how knowledge truly survives, not in buildings or institutions, but in the hearts and minds of those who recognize its value. The afternoon light begins to fade, casting long shadows across the scriptorium. I light a candle and continue my work, the familiar rhythm of pen on parchment a meditation that calms my troubled spirit. Around me, the abbey settles into its evening routine, though I can hear the difference now. Fewer voices, more uncertainty, the sound of boxes being packed and inventory being tallied. Brother Benedict appears at my side again, his face grave. "The commissioners have finished their work for today," he says. "They will return tomorrow with wagons." I nod, understanding what he does not say. Tomorrow the real work of dissolution will begin. The manuscripts will be loaded onto carts, the chalices wrapped in cloth, the very stones of our devotion numbered and catalogued for sale. "What did the abbot say?" I ask. "He spoke of submission to God's will," Benedict replies, but I can hear the strain in his voice. "He reminded us that we are called to obedience, that our true treasure is not in earthly things, but in heaven." "He is right, of course," I say, though the words feel hollow. Yet it grieves me to think of these manuscripts scattered to the four winds, their wisdom lost to merchants who see only their material value. Benedict nods, understanding my pain. Brother Peter asked if we might hide some of the most precious volumes, secret them away until these troubles pass. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him that hiding truth serves no one," Benedict says. "Better to trust in God's providence than to risk our souls in deception." I consider his words as I work. Is it deception to preserve knowledge? Or is it a higher form of obedience to the God who gave us minds to think and hands to create? The question troubles me, but I find no easy answer in the depths of my heart. As the evening bell calls us to Vespers, I complete another page of the Psalms. The words speak of God's faithfulness through all generations, of his mercy enduring forever. I read them again as the ink dries, letting their meaning sink deep into my soul. Whatever comes tomorrow, these words will remain true. Whatever becomes of our books and our buildings, the word itself cannot be dissolved or sold or scattered. In the church we sing the evening psalms with voices that carry both sorrow and hope. The familiar Latin phrases rise to the vaulted ceiling like incense, and I close my eyes and let the music wash over me. Brother Marcus's voice cracks on the high notes, betraying the emotion he struggles to contain. Brother Francis sings with fierce intensity, as if he could somehow hold back the tide of change through the sheer force of his devotion. After prayers, I return to my cell and kneel beside my narrow bed. Outside my window, London sleeps under a canopy of stars, the same stars that have watched over this abbey for centuries. I pray for wisdom, for strength, for the grace to accept what cannot be changed while still finding ways to preserve what should not be lost. As I finally lay down to rest, I think of young Thomas Hartwell and the light that came into his eyes when he understood the sacred nature of the scribe's work. Perhaps dissolution is not only about ending, but also about scattering seeds that will take root in unexpected places. Perhaps the knowledge that has been gathered here will find new homes, new guardians, new ways to serve the greater good. I fall asleep to the sound of Brother Benedict's coughing through the thin wall, and I dream of manuscripts with wings, flying across the realm to places where they will be treasured and preserved, where the work of copying and illuminating will continue in secret, until the world is ready once again to receive the fullness of our tradition. I wake before dawn to find frost covering my small window, delicate patterns of ice that catch the first light like the most intricate illumination. Winter has come early this year, and I wonder if it is an omen of the cold times ahead. My joints ache as I rise, a reminder that I am no longer the young monk who first took up the quill with trembling hands. Yet the work continues, and I dress quickly in the pre-dawn darkness, eager to steal a few more hours with my manuscripts before the commissioners return. The scriptorium is silent and cold, but I welcome the solitude. I kindle a small fire in the brazier and settle at my table, taking up the work where I left it the evening before. The psalm speaks of walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and the words seem prophetic in the grey morning light. I copy each letter with special care, as if the very act of writing might hold back the darkness that threatens to engulf us. The sound of carts rumbling across the Abbey's cobblestones announces the commissioner's return. I hear voices calling orders, the scrape of wood against stone, the jingle of harness and bridle. The great work of dissolution has begun in earnest, and I force myself to concentrate on the page before me, finding refuge in the familiar ritual of copying scripture. Young Thomas Hartwell appears at the entrance to the scriptorium, his face troubled. Behind him, two burly men carry an empty chest, its iron bindings gleaming in the morning light. They are here for the manuscripts, and my heart clenches like a fist as I realize that my time as keeper of these treasures is coming to an end. "Brother Oswin," Thomas says, his voice carefully formal in the presence of his superiors, "we must begin with the inventorying of the scriptorium." I nod and set down my quill, though every instinct screams at me to continue writing, to somehow finish this one last page before they take everything away. How would you have me proceed? Each manuscript must be examined and catalogued, he explains, producing a ledger book from his satchel. Title, language, condition, estimated value. The commissioners will determine which items are to be preserved and which... He does not finish the sentence, but I understand. Some will be sold to collectors, others burned as fuel, still others distributed to institutions that support the King's cause. The thought of Brother Aldrich's magnificent copy of St. Augustine feeding a hearth fire makes my stomach turn, but I force myself to remain composed. For the next several hours, I watch as centuries of accumulated wisdom are reduced to entries in a ledger book. Thomas handles each volume with care, and I can see the struggle in his eyes as he assigns monetary values to works that are truly priceless. The men who accompany him are less gentle, stacking manuscripts like cordwood, their rough hands leaving smudges on vellum that has remained pristine for decades. As we work, other brothers drift by the scriptorium, their faces drawn with grief. Brother Marcus pauses at the entrance, his usually steady hands shaking as he watches an illuminated missal being wrapped in rough cloth. Brother Francis cannot bear to look at all, hurrying past with his head bowed and his lips moving in silent prayer. "This one is beautiful," Thomas says, holding up a copy of the Gospels that Brother Aldrich began and I completed after his death. The marginalia bloom with fantastic creatures, griffins and dragons, angels and demons, all rendered in colours that seem to glow with inner light. The illumination work is extraordinary. Brother Aldrich was the finest illuminator I have ever known, I tell him. He could make gold leaf sing and lapis lazuli dance. This book represents 3 years of his life, 3 years of prayer and devotion transformed into beauty. Thomas makes a note in his ledger, and I see him assign a high value to the work. "It will go to a private collector," he says quietly, "someone who will appreciate its artistry." I want to ask if this collector will understand the prayers embedded in every brushstroke, the hours of meditation that went into each illuminated capital, the love that flows through every page like blood through veins. But I remain silent, knowing that such questions serve no purpose now. By midday, half the scriptorium has been emptied. The shelves that once groaned under the weight of accumulated knowledge now stand bare and cold, their wooden surfaces scarred by decades of use. I feel as if I am watching the dismantling of my own soul piece by piece, volume by volume. During the brief respite for the midday meal, I find myself alone with Thomas in the scriptorium. The other workers have gone to eat in the refectory, leaving us surrounded by stacks of catalogued manuscripts awaiting transport. The young clerk sits at my table, his head in his hands, and I can see the weight of his task bearing down upon him. "This troubles you," I observe, settling beside him on the bench where generations of scribes have sat. "My father would weep to see this," he says, his voice thick with emotion. "He taught me that books are sacred things, that destroying knowledge is a sin against God and man. Yet here I am, participating in the very thing he warned me against." "You are not destroying knowledge," I tell him gently. "You are preserving what you can within the constraints you have been given. There is honour in that, even if it brings pain." He looks up at me with eyes red-rimmed from strain and sleepless nights. "How do you bear it, brother? Watching your life's work scattered like grain before the wind?" I consider his question carefully. "I have been copying manuscripts for 37 years, I say. The true value of the work is not in the physical books themselves, but in the knowledge they contain and the spirit in which they are created. But when these books are sold and scattered, how will that knowledge survive? It will survive in the hearts and minds of those who have read them, in the copies that will be made, in the teaching that passes from master to student. You carry some of it now, in the reverence your father taught you." He nods slowly. "I have been thinking," he says quietly, "about what you showed me yesterday. Could such knowledge be preserved in writing, a manual for future scribes? The idea strikes me like lightning, brilliant and sudden. A treatise on the scribe's art, I murmur. Instructions for mixing inks, preparing surfaces, cutting quills, creating illuminations. It could be disguised as a purely practical manual," Thomas says. "Nothing that would attract attention, just the technical knowledge." I feel a surge of hope such as I have not experienced in weeks. "Such a work would need to be written carefully," I say, "with attention to detail, for someone learning the craft without a master to guide them." "I could help," Thomas offers. "I have access to paper and ink. I could ensure copies are made and distributed to places where they might be preserved." The audacity of the plan both thrills and terrifies me, yet the alternative, allowing centuries of knowledge to vanish, seems far worse. We would need to be careful, I warn. Any unusual activity would be noticed. "I understand," he says. "But, brother, if we do not act now, when will we have another chance?" The afternoon brings new challenges. Among the manuscripts is a copy of the Bible written in gold ink on purple vellum, a gift from a Byzantine emperor. "Master Cromwell will want to see this personally," one commissioner mutters. I watch as they wrap it in silk. Yet even as they take, I am already thinking of what we will create. The manual takes shape in my mind, detailed, practical, enduring. As the carts rumble away and Thomas turns to leave, I whisper, "Tomorrow, we begin." He nods. Understanding passes between us like a sacred vow. That night I kneel in prayer and I feel peace. In the face of destruction, we will preserve. In the shadow of dissolution, We will write. The decision made, I begin work at once. In the quiet hours before matins, I sketch the first outline of the manuscript in the margins of a discarded ledger. My hands remember the rhythm, even if my joints complain. I write not as a scribe under orders, but as a guardian of memory. The first section will cover the preparation of tools, how to select reeds for quills, how to temper them with heat, how to carve the nib to suit different hands and inks. I record the secrets of ink making, oak gall and iron salt for black, verdigris for green, saffron for gold, the careful balance of vinegar and wine. I include Brother Aldrich's method for refining gold leaf and my own adjustments for Caribbean humidity, though I suspect the next custodian of this text will not be writing in Guadeloupe. Still, I write as if he might. Thomas brings me paper hidden beneath his coat and binding thread tucked in the lining of his satchel. We choose the hours carefully, when the workers are elsewhere, when the commissioners are occupied with wine and tall tales of confiscated relics. In the hush of the scriptorium, our plan takes form. Each page is a candle lit in the dark. Thomas copies my work in secret at night. He returns the following day with corrections, marginalia, and the quiet fire of a student becoming a master. "You have a gift," I tell him once. "You gave it to me," he replies. The second section covers page preparation, how to stretch parchment without tearing, how to rule margins using twine and ash, how to cut sheets to consistent size using only the pressure of a bone knife and a monk's patience. I include diagrams drawn from memory, taken from texts already lost. The Abbey bell tolls at odd times now, less for prayer and more for departures, monks sent elsewhere, carts carrying away books, stones removed from cloisters for other uses. One night a gust of wind blows open the scriptorium shutters, and the flame of my candle dances wildly across the page. I shield it with my hand, ink blotting the parchment. I do not wipe it away. Some stains are part of the story. The third section details illumination, mixing pigments, applying gold leaf, how to layer paint without cracking the vellum beneath. I draw small examples in the margins, tiny angels, curled ivy, beasts with eyes full of meaning. Thomas studies them closely. "We should include prayers," he says. "A blessing for each stage." I hesitate. Would that not draw suspicion? Only if they are obvious. And so we begin again, this time with coded prayers. A psalm tucked behind the instructions for gilding, a verse embedded in the page numbering, a hidden benediction under the recipe for red pigment. We do not write the name of God, but He is present on every page. On the seventh night I wake with chest pain and cannot rise. Thomas finds me slumped near the brazier. He helps me to the infirmary and sits with me through the night, whispering from the manuscript to keep me alert. "You will finish," I say. "We will," he insists. In the days that follow, I write slower but with greater clarity. The fourth section covers binding, the use of linen thread, the grain of leather, the making of clasps. I include warnings, how too much glue will warp the spine, how poorly dried skins will crack in winter, how rats will chew through cheap pasteboard. Thomas begins drafting a preface not under his name, but as a humble student of the sacred craft. "What if they find it?" he asks. "Then let it be worthy of discovery," I say. At night I dream of a future abbey, not made of stone, but of minds and hearts bound by the words we leave behind. A young girl in a wool dress holds our manual with reverence. She doesn't know our names, but she lights a candle, opens the cover, and begins to copy. One morning, Thomas arrives with news. The commissioners are leaving within the week. We have 5 days left to finish. I stop editing. I simply write. The final section is shorter, a meditation on the purpose of the scribe. I write not about ink or line spacing, but about silence. The silence required to hear what must be written. The silence between letters where meaning lives. The silence of God who speaks through those who listen long enough. I leave space at the end for Thomas. He adds a final line in his own hand. May this book find hands not yet born and hearts not yet broken. I do not ask what it cost him to write those words. I only nod. On the final night, we wrap the manuscript in linen and seal it with wax. Thomas tucks it into the false bottom of a chest filled with kindling. Firewood for the kitchens, he explains. No one checks the ash carts. I do not sleep. I watch the window for dawn and pray that the chest will pass unsearched. The sun rises, the carts depart. Hours pass in silence. Then Thomas returns, breathless. It's done. I reach for my quill one last time and write a final entry in the corner of my old ledger, one manuscript hidden. One soul preserved. It is enough. That night I light a single candle in the scriptorium. Not for reading nor for writing, just for remembering. The Abbey is dissolving, but we are not lost. We are transcribed. March brings unseasonably warm weather and the final dissolution of Westminster Abbey. The great bells that have called us to prayer for centuries are loaded onto carts, their bronze voices silenced forever. The lead is stripped from the roof, the windows are boarded up, and the stones themselves are numbered for sale to anyone with the coin to purchase them. I watch from my window as the last of our manuscripts are carried away, knowing that our secret manual lies hidden beneath loose floorboards in the abandoned chamber where we created it. Thomas has already begun the delicate work of distributing copies, using his connections in the Chancellor's office to find trustworthy recipients. Brother Marcus has agreed to take one copy to Scotland, Thomas reports during one of our final meetings. He has a cousin who serves in the scriptorium at Melrose Abbey. And the copy for Brother William? Already delivered, he replies. He wept when he saw what we had accomplished, said it was like watching the resurrection of the dead. I nod, feeling a deep sense of completion. Our work has taken root, begun to spread, found willing hands to carry it forward. Whatever else happens, we have succeeded in our primary goal, preserving the knowledge that would otherwise have died with us. The formal ceremony of dissolution takes place on a grey morning in late March. Abbot Cranmer reads the royal decree that strips Westminster Abbey of its religious status and transfers its properties to the Crown. The remaining brothers gather in what was once our chapter house, now empty of everything but memories and shadows. We have served God faithfully in this place for many centuries, the abbot says, his voice steady despite the tears that stream down his weathered cheeks. Now we are called to serve him elsewhere, in whatever circumstances he provides. Let us not grieve for what is lost, but give thanks for what we have been privileged to preserve. After the ceremony, we scatter like seeds on the wind. Some brothers will find places in other monasteries that have survived the dissolution. Others will return to their families. Still others will seek employment as chaplains or tutors in noble households. I am too old for such changes. I have been offered a place in the household of Sir Edmund Carey, a gentleman who maintains a small library and needs someone to manage his books and correspondence. As I pack my few possessions, my personal breviary, a change of habit, the tools of my trade, I think of the manual hidden beneath the floorboards. Thomas will retrieve it after the Abbey is officially empty, along with the remaining copies we have not yet distributed. Our secret will go with us into the world, carried in the hands and hearts of those who understand its value. Brother Benedict stops by my cell as I prepare to leave. "It has been an honour to work with you on the manual," he says, clasping my hand. "Whatever becomes of us, we have done something that will outlast our mortal lives." "The work continues," I reply, our motto during these long months. Thomas appears at the entrance to my cell, dressed now in the plain clothes of a secular clerk. "I have found employment with a bookseller in London," he tells me. "Master Harrison deals in manuscripts and has connections throughout England and the continent. I will continue distributing copies of our work and perhaps even arrange for printed editions if the political climate allows." The idea of our manual in print, of hundreds, even thousands, learning from our hands, it fills me with wonder. "Remember," I tell him, "the true value lies not in technique, but in the spirit, love of beauty, reverence for knowledge, patience to create something that endures." "I will remember," he promises, "and I will ensure others do too." The day of final departure dawns clear and bright. I take one last walk through the empty corridors of Westminster Abbey, saying farewell to the places that held the best years of my life. The scriptorium stands hollow now, its windows letting in spring sunlight that illuminates nothing but dust. And yet I do not feel despair. I feel triumph. The physical space may be gone, but the work lives on, in the copies Thomas carries across England and beyond, in the techniques that will be taught by others, in the beauty that will be created by hands we will never see. The scriptorium endures. Sir Edmund's carriage arrives at midday. As we roll through the gates of Westminster Abbey for the last time, I turn for a final look at the place that shaped my soul. It looks smaller now, diminished by the absence of the life that once filled it. But I carry that life with me, in memory, in skill, in quiet determination. The road winds through green spring fields. I watch farmers planting seed and think of the ones Thomas and I have sown. Seeds of knowledge, not for one harvest, but for generations. At Sir Edmund's estate, I am given a chamber with good light. A peaceful place, a place to begin again. That evening I find a small wrapped parcel among my things. A page from the manual in Thomas's hand, with a note. To Brother Oswin, Master of the Scribal Arts, may this work flourish in ways we cannot imagine. The work continues. And so it does. In new hands, in unexpected places, the Abbey may fall, but the work continues, and I am content. "5 years have passed since the dissolution of Westminster Abbey, and I write these final words in the library of Sir Edmund Carey, surrounded by volumes that represent the scattered treasures of a dozen dissolved monasteries. My hair has turned white, my hands shake more than they once did, but my devotion to the written word remains as strong as ever. The manual that Thomas Hartwell and I created in those desperate winter evenings has found its way into more hands than we ever dared hope. Word reaches me occasionally of its influence. A workshop in Canterbury, where young men learn the old techniques, a scriptorium in Dublin, where Irish monks preserve both Latin and Gaelic manuscripts using our methods, Even reports of copies reaching the continent, where scholars fleeing religious persecution have established new centres of learning. Thomas visits me twice each year, bringing news of the wider world and reports of our manual's continuing influence. He has prospered in his career as a bookseller, but more importantly, he has become a patron of learning, using his profits to commission new copies of important works and to support scribes who carry on the traditional crafts. Master Harrison has received an order from Prague, he tells me during his most recent visit. A group of scholars there wishes to establish a scriptorium using the methods described in De Arte Scribendi. They have heard that it contains techniques not found in any other source. I smile at this news, remembering how we worked by candlelight to record every detail we could remember, every technique we had learned, every innovation we had discovered. What seemed like a desperate attempt to preserve knowledge against destruction has become something far greater, a textbook that is actively shaping the future of manuscript production. And what of Brother Benedict? I ask. Have you had word from him? He writes from Lincoln, where he has established himself as a teacher of young clerks. He uses our manual as his primary text, and his students are said to produce work of exceptional quality. Several have found employment in the households of bishops and nobles, carrying the knowledge further still. This news brings me particular joy, for Benedict's practical wisdom formed such an important part of our work. To know that he continues to teach, to pass on not just techniques, but the love of craftsmanship that makes those techniques meaningful, assures me that our tradition will survive in its fullest form. The political situation in England remains unsettled, with religious changes following one upon another as monarchs die and new policies are implemented. Yet through all these upheavals, the demand for skilled scribes continues. Books must be copied, documents must be prepared, records must be kept. The form may change, but the fundamental need for those who can work with pen and ink remains constant. Sir Edmund's eldest son, Robert, has become my most devoted student. Though he will inherit his father's estates and has no need to earn his living as a scribe, he has fallen in love with the art of manuscript illumination. His work shows genuine talent, and I have begun teaching him the most advanced techniques: how to create the subtle gradations of colour that give life to illuminated figures, how to use gold leaf to create the impression of divine light, how to design marginalia that complement rather than distract from the text. Master Oswin, he says to me one afternoon, as we work together on a psalter he is copying as a gift for his betrothed, do you ever regret the dissolution? Do you miss the old life at Westminster? I consider his question carefully, setting down my brush to look out the window at the garden where spring flowers bloom in careful profusion. I miss the community, I tell him honestly, the daily round of prayer and work, the certainty of purpose, the company of men who shared my devotion to learning. But I cannot regret what has happened, for it has led to this, to the preservation and spreading of knowledge that might otherwise have died with us. You mean the manual? I mean more than that, I reply. I mean the discovery that tradition can survive the destruction of institutions, that knowledge can flourish even when its original guardians are scattered. What we learned in those dark months was that the true strength of our calling lay not in the buildings we inhabited or the offices we held, but in the skills we possessed and the love of learning that motivated us. Robert nods, his young face serious with concentration. And now that knowledge lives in many places instead of just one. Exactly. A monastery can be dissolved by royal decree, but knowledge that lives in many minds and many hands is far more difficult to destroy. We have made our tradition stronger by making it more widely distributed. As the evening light fades, I return to my own work, a project I have been labouring on for the past 2 years. It is a chronicle of the dissolution, told from the perspective of one who lived through it, but focusing not on the politics or the personalities involved, but on the human cost of the changes and the ways in which communities adapted to survive. I write of Brother Marcus, who found refuge in Scotland and established a small school, of Brother Francis, who returned to his family's farm but continues to grow the herbs used in manuscript preparation, of the dozen other brothers from Westminster, each finding new ways to serve learning. But mostly I write about the unexpected discoveries that came from our apparent defeat. The work continues, I write in the Chronicle's final pages, but it continues in new forms, with new energy, reaching new audiences. What was intended as an ending has become a beginning. The ink flows, the knowledge spreads, the tradition endures. What more could any scribe ask for? Thus ends the Chronicle of Brother Oswin, scribe of Westminster Abbey, keeper of ancient wisdom, guardian of eternal truths.
You've been listening to The Sleeping Archive. Sleep well. History will wait.